his 15 years, David has spoken to audiences on every inhabited continent. His clients use the US Air Force, Australian government, the Fortune 50 companies such as Microsoft, AT&T, United Health Groups, Fannie Mae, and Starter Farm. Prior to becoming a speaker, he was a leadership professor and stand-up comedian. He's also managed non-profit enterprises that provide employment for people with disabilities. And in between presenting, David competes in ultramarathons and Ironman triathlons. Wow, curious to find out more about that. You've got a Doctor of Management degree in organizational leadership, as well as a graduate degree in psychology. You've authored 4 books, one being The 4 Factors of Effective Leadership, The Freak Factor for Kids, Pink Goldfish, and mate, I'm really curious to dive into the Freak Factor concept. But before we do, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Dude, it was a bit of a tongue tie getting all that intro out, but I'm super fascinated and pumped on where we're going to head today. And I wanted to say welcome for any of you guys listening to us, watching us live here, wherever you are in the world. Let's make this as engaging as possible. And please put all your comments and your questions on the chat box, wherever you are in the world and on the interwebs. And Rafi from my team will absolutely feed the questions through to me and David. Let's talk about the Freak Factor.
Yeah, I mean, the Freak Factor really just started as a personal experience. You know, I was always in trouble as a kid because I couldn't sit still and be quiet and do what I was told. And everyone's advice, parents, teachers, employers, was you got to fix that. You got to get better at sitting still, being quiet, and doing what you're told. You're never going to make it if you don't sit still, be quiet, and do what you're told. And then through a series of circumstances where I wasn't attempting to do this because I didn't even know it was a thing, I became a professional speaker, and now I get paid to stand up, not to sit down. I get paid to talk, not to be quiet. And I get paid to run my own business, not to do what other people tell me to do. And even by then, I still hadn't realized that, you know, every one of my weaknesses turned out to be a strength. Every one of the worst things about me was actually the best things about me. And when I did realize that, I first had it as a question: is that true? Are my weaknesses strengths? And I discovered it was. And then I wondered if it's true for other people, because if it's my story, but it's not anybody else's story, it doesn't really help anyone. And then I just discovered all these amazing examples of how people have weaknesses that are strengths, and put together an assessment where I really show pretty much, I think everybody has weaknesses that are strengths. Any quality that we see as a negative is also, there's an upside to it that is usually missed by either us or other people. And that became the Freak Factor. So it was really just something that really helped me, and went counter to everything I'd ever been taught, and started sharing it because I wish somebody would have told my parents, my teachers, and my employers. So I pretty much go around the world telling parents, teachers, employers. In fact, you said you were in Perth, and I don't have a lot of decorations here in my room, but this is a huge poster from a tour I did of Western Australia a few years ago. Goldfields Esperance, Regional Development Australia for Goldfields Esperance, Kalgoorlie Boulder Chamber of Commerce. So all that Western Australia. I think a lot of that's south of you, but I started in Perth, and I ended a national tour one time of educators. It was a program to help people in schools when kids were struggling in school, skipping school, giving up on school. It was called Youth Connections, and it was a national program. And I traveled around the country doing Freak Factor training for the workers in that program, so they could find the strengths that were hiding inside of the weaknesses of these kids who people had who decided were disadvantaged or at risk or delinquent or whatever it happened to be. And so it was a really positive experience. So a little Western Australia trivia from Dave Rendall there.
Wow. Man, it's going to be a hot episode. This is one of my favorite topics, and I'm pretty excited to dive deep. If you're watching, hit the like button, let us know that you're there, and please start a watch party, because I think that more people need to hear about how they can own their perceived weaknesses. And I guess that's my first question for you, David. Like, do you think this is perception? Do you think that our perception or society's perception that there's these strengths and weaknesses, when in actual fact they're just quality and characteristics of human beings?
I think it's both. I think they're real. they're real qualities and characteristics of people. It's that you can choose to see one side or the other. And I think one of the real keys of the book, and I did a TEDx talk in Zurich last year and really focused in on this, the situation really has a huge impact on how people perceive it. So when I'm on stage, nobody says, oh, Dave wasn't very good at sitting still and being quiet and doing what he was told. But when I was in school, that's all they said. When I do a 100-mile, 160-kilometer ultra marathon during the middle of the pandemic by running laps in my neighborhood, people say, wow, that's amazing. I could never run that far. And how did you do that by yourself? And that must have taken a lot of motivation and discipline. And when I'm tapping my toes and banging on the desk and talking to the person next to me, I'm hyperactive when I'm in school. So this quality that was seen as very negative in school is seen very positively in my life when I'm in an activity where it fits, right? So some activities put the spotlight on the best things about us. Other things put the spotlight on the worst things about us. I mean, I got introduced one time in Washington by a state Supreme Court justice, and he said that he doesn't like to really talk to people and converse with people. So he became a judge so he could be in total control. He doesn't like small talk, and he doesn't like having to interact where the rules aren't really clear. And so he became a Supreme Court justice where the rules are super clear and you're in a lot of control over that situation. And in that situation, he looks really strong, but he was like, hey, if I'm at this event and you guys are trying to chat with me, I'm not really very comfortable with that. And so situations are hugely powerful in how people perceive it, but also we've been taught to perceive certain things as good, certain things as bad. I don't know if you're getting a lot of this over in Australia, but I know you have issues with your Aboriginal community. I mean, we have huge racial issues here in the United States, and we also do it to women. So if you're Black, we're more likely to see your strengths as weaknesses. If you're female, we're more likely to see your strengths as weaknesses. And so we have these biases where we're likely to see what's wrong with you. And we also just have basic psychological biases, negativity bias. We're likely to see what's wrong instead of what's right in any situation, even if what's wrong is really, really small and what's right is really, really big. So all I try to do is tell people, yeah, that's what you see first. But let me just tell you there's more, and see if people can't start to find those strengths that they didn't even know were there in themselves and in the people around them.
Yeah. It's really interesting, David, because like growing up, similar situation, like I didn't ever kind of fit in school, got teased a lot, got bullied a lot, was told by multiple teachers. And I speak about it in the acknowledgements of my book, actually, multiple teachers that I'd never amount to anything. And, the last few years, I've just had this huge realization and very much started to own all aspects of me that for a long time, society told me, or I made believe wasn't okay to be me. But this whole time, I wasn't attracting my tribe. I wasn't attracting the people around me because I was trying to be something other than what I was. And this really interesting thing happens is the moment you stop bucking against that, and the moment you start to own those quirks within yourself or those aspects that society or certain contextual situations deem as not being a fit, it's like all of a sudden you start fitting. All of a sudden you start attracting your tribe. You start attracting people who resonate with who you really are. And life takes a significant turn. And for me, like there's a sense of liberation in that. Because I think our innate human desire is to belong. One of our safety patterns is to belong, because if we belong, then we're safe. We're going to survive. But yet it's that sense of belonging that kind of leads us down a path of trying to be someone other than who we are.
Well, and that's one of the paradoxes is people think, oh, well, Dave, I don't want to be a freak. I don't want to be different. I don't want to stand out. I want to have friends. I want to have connections. I want to have relationships. And so there's a little bit of a paradox there. One of the things that I encourage us to do is, find people who are strong where we're weak, find people who have strengths where we have weaknesses, find people who are profoundly and maybe completely opposite, different from us. But we also have to find people who are weird like us. We have to find people who we can be ourselves. We don't have to pretend to be someone else. We don't need to perform for them. They'll accept us for who we are, and they might even push us to be more of who we are instead of barely tolerating it. There's kind of three levels. It's telling you can't be who you are. It's like, well, okay, if that's the way you need to be. And then there's people who are like, I think you've got more, Barry, let's turn it up. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book is amplification. And if you can find people who encourage you to turn it up when really everyone else basically is telling you to turn it down. You were talking about, being told you never amount to anything. One of the stories I share in the Freak Factor talk is Jimmy Kimmel. He's one of the highest paid comedians in the United States. He has his own television show. And his teacher in 10th grade told him, you'll never amount to anything unless you stop screwing around. And then he became one of the most successful comedians in the world. And what I tell people is he went pro, right? He went pro, he went full time. He got more childish, more silly, more ridiculous, more mature. You'll never amount to anything. That wasn't even close to true. But, and this is crucial, and it's like you said, not only do we have to accept who we are, he didn't just accept it, he fought against that pressure to change. And then he became more of who he was. He turned up the volume, and that's when he found success. So people think, if I could just moderate it, if I could just find the perfect balance, if I could just be well-balanced and well-rounded, if I could find just the right amount of all the right good qualities, that's when I'd find success. And no, that's not. And usually that involves turning the volume down on things that you are, but also turning the volume up on things that you aren't. So you spend your whole life fighting yourself. And what I'm like is, hey, look, when you turn up the volume, that's when you succeed. But you're being told by people you'll never amount to anything. And that seems plausible. I mean, when you're a kid and the adults say that's not going to work, you figure they must know. You figure they must have some knowledge and wisdom about that. And it turns out that people are terrible predictors of others people's future success.
I think we carry such a huge burden, and it comes back to what you shared. It's like we're fighting against ourselves all the time. And the interesting thing is that when people even like fight enough to achieve that place that they think that they'll fit in or belong, or they'll have the friends, they realize it never feels like what they thought it'd feel like. It never feels right because they're not being congruent and authentic with who they really are. And you raised an interesting point before, and I'm curious to get your perspective. You said, find people who bring that up in you. Do you think it starts with actually finding others outside of you? Or do you think it actually first starts with you finding you and accepting who you are, that then attracts and brings these people into your life?
Well, I think it's some combination. I mean, I was in college and or university, and the resident director, the guy who ran the men's dormitory, came up to me after my second year in college, and he said, Dave, are you going to apply to be a resident assistant? One of the student, sort of coordinators in the dorm. And I said, no, I'm the reason you have resident assistants, right? So my identity was here. And he said, no, Dave, when I look at you, I see myself at your age, and I see all the qualities that people see as negatives as positives. He didn't use that exact terminology, but that was basically his message. And he said, the negatives that people see in you, I see as leadership qualities. Basically, if we could use them for good instead of using them for evil. And then I saw myself differently, because I don't know that you can find it in yourself when everything in the world tells you it's not there. Yeah. When every person I encountered was convinced that I was broken, damaged, bad, no good, ineffective, unproductive, whatever, however you want to define it. I don't know that I could have found that. I don't know how I was supposed to automatically have the insight, that maybe these weaknesses are strengths. And maybe I did over time, but I think he really helped to trigger that as a possibility. Maybe everyone's been wrong. Maybe I haven't seen myself accurately. Maybe, think of like an anorexia or something, when people look at their body and they see fat and they see out of shape when everybody else sees basically a skeleton. I think I needed somebody to give me a wake-up call or to challenge what I've been hearing for my whole life. So I think we do need, it does start with ourselves. We need to be aware. We need an assessment of who we are. I created an assessment where people can see how their strengths and weaknesses are connected. It's right there for free on my website. It's in the book. Then we need to accept it, which is that I tolerate it. I acknowledge this is a reality, whether I like it or not. But then we need to appreciate it. We need to be excited about the fact that this is who we are. Stop wishing, to your point, that we were someone else, or more like those good people, whatever they are, like those successful people, or like those wealthy people, or whatever we think is going on there. And then it turns into amplification. It turns into alignment, trying to find the right fit. It turns to affiliation, trying to find our tribe and find those people. So I don't know that we can expect people to magically do it on their own. And that's part of the reason I do what I do, is because I think somebody I can't do the work for people, but I can at least open up the possibility that something is true that we've really been told our whole life isn't.
Yeah.
Really, most of the systems and structures that we live in, school, work, home, our society consistently tell us, they give us one version of success. They give us one definition of success. They give us one path to success. Get good grades, go to a good school, get a good job, buy a good house, these kinds of things, and you'll have a good life. And, and that requires you to, you have to, sometimes do work you don't like, but at least you're getting paid well, or the rewards are down in the future in your superannuation fund, in your retirement fund. So the rewards are, you got to have the discipline now to have more later, and you can't expect too much. And that's why they call it work and all these kinds of things. I think someone has to at least alert people to the possibility that that's not true and that there's another way to go about things.
Yeah. Really, really nicely put. I got a follow-up question for that. Just before I do that, anyone watching live tonight, welcome. Please put all your questions and your comments below. Rafi from the team will bring them through, and make sure you hit the like button and let us know you're enjoying the conversation. Question I got for you, I guess a bit of a vulnerable one, is, you had this experience growing up. Sounds to me very similar to me, where, you're constantly reminded of how you didn't fit, maybe where you were falling short and so forth. Do you feel that based on your initial upbringing from your parents, that to some degree that was your exposure into life, that you heard these stories, that you then were attracting ongoing experiences to re-embed that? And I guess what I mean is, like, did you have an environment, or did you attract or create this environment to, I guess, validate your own biases that have been installed from a young age?
No, I don't think so. I think that's the college story. I think I was told those things and I believed those things, because how would I not? How do I, when every adult tells you the same thing? Again, there wasn't even one instance in which there was somebody telling an opposite story, right? And yet, I still kind of tried to do the best I could with what I had, not knowing how it was going to turn out, and just kind of assuming it was going to turn out badly, but just kind of like, well, it wasn't so bad that I didn't want to keep living. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I think I ended up, I don't know if you could say I attracted them or stumbled into them, but I put myself in situations where I could be exposed to an alternative story, right? Where that guy comes up to me and tells me a different story, which then puts me in a position of leadership at the school, and people start giving me leadership books and telling me I have leadership potential. And then I start reading those books and discovering more about who I am, and still thinking that it requires a lot of fixing me and changing me and improving me, but at least in a way that I'm kind of interested in. And, I read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which again, I think has still a very narrow band of what it means to be good, but at least some of those things resonated with me, and gave me sort of hope that I could follow a path that was somewhat of a fit for who I was. And I still wasn't ready to be 100% who I was, but I was starting to discover parts of me that were good that no one else had seen, and feel more confidence and feel more hope. And I think that's a really huge piece, is if you start believing that there's no hope in the future, then why would you keep living for that future? So I think I was fortunate that even just, maybe accidentally in that path, right? You got to go to school, got to go to college. When I went to college, fortunately, I encountered some countercultural voices, right? Some people with a different perspective. I mean, I did a wilderness trip after my second year in college and university, and with this guy who was getting his master's degree in outdoor education or something like that. And he's the one who gave me 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I took this trip through Canada, through this Algonquin Provincial Park, where you're canoeing and portaging between all these places. And I had these experiences where, for example, being hyperactive is a good thing, right? When you're paddling for 12, 13 hours a day, no one's like, geez, Dave, why don't you relax a little bit and just sit back and be quiet? And people are asking you to communicate. People are asking you to converse, and they're asking you about your ideas, and they're giving you a book and asking you to dissect and digest those ideas. So I think I ended up having experiences. I don't know if you'd say I attracted them, but I had experiences that started to counter what I'd been taught for my whole life. And because I think it was a truth I was very open to hearing. And I think most people are. When I tell people your weaknesses are strengths, everyone's wrong, here's a different way to get better, I encounter very little resistance because we want to believe that's true. We don't like the message we've been told, but we think it's true. And so even with the thinnest evidence that I can provide in 1 hour during a keynote speech, people are ready. Like, people are like, oh, wait a second. What did he just say? I might be fine. I might be okay. I might be a good person. I might not be fundamentally flawed. People are open to that, right? People are open to that being a possibility. And so I was too. And so when I started, when that crack appeared, I was ready to tear it wide open. But before, it was an impenetrable wall. I didn't know there was anything on the other side. I just thought it was fundamental reality. And so I tried to be that person that breaks that crack in the wall. There's still a lot of work people have to do to pry it open. Or they hear me and that puts a little crack. Then they hear you. That's a bigger crack. They hear Darius and then it starts to really break down. And then they start to read a book that they found in your book, and they start to read a different book they found in my book, and that references other podcasts, and that references other people, and it tells 14 stories that they never even knew existed about people who've lived their own lives, and then the whole thing just falls down, and they see a future that they never would have seen before. So, and I think that's part of, like you said, finding your tribe. Once you find them, it's rarely one person, because that person at least knows one person. Yeah. And that person at least knows one person. And so there's this, when I studied counseling psychology, there was, I read this huge book. It was terrible. It's about this thick, and it was about group counseling. But I still remember one of the first things in it, it was this concept of universality. And it says that group therapy works, group counseling works, Alcoholics Anonymous would be the thing that people know best, works when you sit down in a group and you find out everybody's struggling with the same thing you're struggling with.
Yeah.
And so I think this can be the same thing when you find out, oh, I'm not the only one who's weird in this way. I'm not the only one who didn't like that. I'm not the only one who didn't want to go that direction. I'm not the only one. That there's a breakthrough in that, and that can make you feel good. You're weird, but there's other people who are weird like you, and that's a big moment in people's lives.
Yeah. Like, us as human beings are a very, very funny species, like Black people, they want to be white and they want to tan their skins to go white, and white people want to get tanned and go black, and people with straight hair want to get curly hair, and people with curly hair want to go straight. Like, it's like, holy shit. Like, there is so much of these aspects of us as human beings are always trying to be something other than what we are. And I think this is why the message that you found, or that's found you, is so powerful, and certainly something that resonates very strong with me as well. Like, I look back now at all the challenge and all the adversity, and as I said, like the whole acknowledgement sections for the teachers and for the bullies and for those people that allowed me to find resilience from a young age. But they allowed me to find who I really am and who I was really here to serve and to be. And I think that there's a lot of weight in what you share. We've got some questions here I'd love to ask you. And if you're watching live, please put your questions, comments below. So Greg from Melbourne. So question for David. I work in education. How to work with parents who tell their kids that they can be number one in anything and everything, no matter what, but at the same time, encourage kids to be themselves? Good question, Greg.
Yeah, I think that's a crippling thing. There's a lot of motivational speakers, and most people would put me in that category just because we don't have good categories. They love to say things like, there's no limits. You can be whatever you want to be. And that's stupid. I am 6'6", so I'm 2 meters tall. I weigh 85 kilograms. I have the body of a high school girls basketball player. You know what I mean? In fact, a lot of them are bigger than me. I can't be a professional American football player. I couldn't play rugby in Australia. I don't have the body, and someone might say, work out more, drink protein shakes. When I graduated from high school, I was 65 kilograms. There's no amount of protein shakes. There's no amount of steroids that's going to turn that into the kind of body. And let's just pick a very specific one. I'm never going to be a jockey riding a horse to victory in the Kentucky Derby. I think we have unlimited potential for happiness, fulfillment, meaning, purpose, success, whatever you want to call that. But there's some things that some of us simply can't do. There's some things that simply aren't for us, or the time, energy, and resources it would take for us to force ourselves to do that thing or be that thing would be so overwhelming that it wouldn't be worth it. When meanwhile, there's all these other resources that are just there for the taking, right? That's why I played basketball instead of horse racing. That's why I played basketball instead of American football. That's why I played basketball instead of soccer. I used to play soccer. But there's a, maybe for goalie, or maybe there's a couple of tall guys, but really when you watch soccer, you watch a bunch of very short, very quick, very strong people. That wasn't for me. I picked the sport that was the best fit for who I was. I wasn't trying to turn myself into someone else. So I think we think we're motivating children, but how overwhelming is it to find out you could be anything and then you suck in math class? I could be anything I want to be in the world, but I can't pass math. But the truth is I could if I wanted it bad enough and I tried hard enough. And so then all we do is we end up demoralizing people who think, I guess I don't want it bad enough and I guess I'm just not trying hard enough. So I guess it's my fault that I'm bad at math. I guess it's my fault that when I'm in English class, it just doesn't make sense to me. I guess it's my fault that nothing about history turns me on. And I guess it's my fault I have dyslexia and I can't read very well. I guess if I wanted it bad enough and tried hard enough, I could be some great novelist and I could just love reading for reading's sake, just like my English teacher does. I guess it's my fault that I have ADHD. And I guess if I wanted it bad enough, I could focus better. I guess if I wanted it bad enough. So I think the way you work with parents is you share the freak factor, you share real stories of how we need to build on our strengths and not try to fix our weaknesses. We challenge some of those basic assumptions. And I usually do it by trying to start with the parents themselves, and ask these kinds of questions and get into whether these kinds of things are really possible. And how realistic is it? I mean, in your university system and ours, sooner or later, you have to pick a major. It doesn't matter if you could do any of the things. At some point, you have to pick one of the things.
Yeah.
And so which one of those things is it going to be? And so I think we lie to kids when we say that, but we think, and this is what I talk about in my speeches, because I don't want people to think I'm down on parents. I'm not down on even on my parents. They were trying their best. They were teaching me with their parents, their teachers, and their employers had taught them. They were teaching them from their worldview. And so I always teach people that we have the right intentions. Most people, I think, have the right intentions. They just have the wrong framework. And so I guess my answer is that you have to look at giving them a different framework over time, share them, send a TEDx talk where someone's talking about building on your strengths. I have a TEDx talk that I just did in Zurich last year where I talk about the power of situations. I have a TEDx talk about the freak factor that I did, probably 6 or 7 years ago. But there's others. There's one called The Myth of Average, which is a great book as well, called The End of Average. There's a book called Faster Than Normal that you can share for parents who have kids with ADHD. There's a book called Quiet that you can share with parents who feel like their kid is too quiet and too shy and is too introverted and would be better if they could just be more social and find more friends. So I think focus on that individual kid, help the parent understand how those kids' kind of weaknesses might also be strengths. But in that situation, the difficulty is their parents, if anything, the weakness is only a lack of discipline and a lack of effort, right? Because my kid could be anything. And I think that's a real challenge to try to overcome that because everybody's saying the same thing. So I think one of the best answers for that, especially for teachers, is stories. You have to tell people stories and give them real life examples of real people that challenge the assumptions that people have, because you can dislike somebody's theory, but a story proves a reality, at least in one case, that challenges people's existing assumptions. And that's what I've tried to do in the Freak Factor. And that's what a lot of these TEDx talks, and I mean, there's movies and things like that too, that do the same thing. I mean, Temple Grandin, a woman with autism who understands livestock of all things in a way that no one else could understand, and becomes this world's leading expert in livestock management, because in a sense, she has a sixth sense for what it's like to be, to be inside the mind of an animal. And so this huge disability that she has is this massive advantage that no one could ever anticipate. And so you tell somebody that story and they have to grapple with the truth of that instead of saying, no, she should have just, gotten some therapy, gotten a good job, gone to a good college and tried to fit in better and stop being so weird. No, she built a life around how weird she was and found a strength inside of everything that people call a disability. A diagnosable disability, a condition. So I think that's one of the answers is stories. People have to encounter and grapple with the realities of lives where people have been profoundly successful without following that same traditional path.
Yeah. And I think really, really beautifully put, I think the diversification as well, like allowing your kids to have experiences from all walks of life. It's funny because it's come up a few times. Like I talk often about how I bring my children up, which is like, I'm very competitive with them. Like, I don't want to give them the easy path or allow them to feel like that dad's letting them win. Like I'm super competitive with them, but in that it's teaching them resilience. It's teaching them, that they've got to work towards being or achieving something. And it's not just going to be handed to them. Like, I don't want them to get 18 years old, move out of home and then life smack them down. Like, let them be smacked down now in a safe environment when you're there to pick them up and just share with them stories around different ways of being. The message from Keith from Perth: given Dave's disruptive message, how would he assess the pros and cons of conventional MBA training where it's all about tough competition?
And not just that, it's about so many things, right? And so, it doesn't teach cooperation and teamwork. It does support kind of a winner takes all mindset. It's meant to prop up the existing corporate culture. It doesn't focus a lot on entrepreneurship. It doesn't focus a lot on, I've taught in MBA programs. We have one class on organizational behavior, which teaches you about yourself and interacting with others, and everything else is about spreadsheets and marketing and accounting and finance, as though you can manage that way. So I think we have people who have these beliefs that you can somehow manage an organization of people without ever interacting with or understanding people. And I think that's one of the areas where this comes in. Well, then we just start thinking of people as money, as computers, as equipment, as resources. And so we even call them human resources. And so we move them around just like the generals did back in the day. We move them around like chess pieces on a map, like chess pieces on a board. Oh, this 40,000 of them died. Well, that's disappointing. We need to get 40,000 more in. And literally, that's what people used to do. And now we do that. We had to, get rid of 1,000 workers. We made 1,000 workers redundant over there. We need to move those resources over here where we're making more money. So I increase my bonus and my stock options, and we make things more efficient and more effective. So it's all built inside of a worldview that's very dehumanizing. And also very unrealistic, that you can somehow effectively manage an organization without managing the people in that organization, without understanding those people, without relating and connecting to those people. And again, so then all the development and training goes the same way. Like I hire, if I believe that, based on, well, if you want the job, I'll teach you how to do it. Anybody can do it. Anybody can be trained to do it. Anybody can do it if they just want it bad enough. We don't even need to have that much screening. Let's just get a bunch of people in. Let's throw them in some training and I'm sure they'll be fine. Let's offer some incentives, usually financial. People will figure it out. And the people who don't, they're losers anyway. They were never going to make it. They're not motivated. They didn't really want it bad enough. And we'll get the good ones. And you just keep, and when you do that, just because of the power dynamics and the structures in society, you're going to end up having a certain amount of that look like it's true. There will be people who drop out. There will be people who succeed. There will be winners and losers. You will have some people, even a blind squirrel gets a nut sometimes. You will have people who make it through the process and seem to be doing well. You will get your bonus sometimes. We've seen this in the US right now with this pandemic. You have people losing their jobs, up to at one point 30% of people applying for unemployment. And you find out people just took bonuses the week before because they're doing great. They're doing fine. When those people lost their jobs, that helped the company stay on target for their, profit or whatever it happened to be. And you got somebody who's getting paid. You got people who get, CEOs who get fired and get $30 million as a severance. I think the MBA program, the fundamental problem in any educational program is that it's usually designed 40 years in the past to reinforce systems that aren't necessarily functional and sustainable, or even just positive for people in general. And it values things that sometimes aren't valuable, and doesn't question those assumptions, right? I don't think an MBA program, one of the things I liked about my doctoral program is the first class was called The Philosophy of Knowledge, where they really called into question everything, kind of about everything, and really put you on a shaky footing as you moved forward. I think an MBA program very specifically just starts with a massive but invisible stack of assumptions about the way the world works and the way people works, and just builds on that and doesn't ever call into question those things. And I think that's very, very damaging, because again, it gives people a picture of the world that seems very certain, very quantified and quantifiable, that they don't question, and it drives them farther into a life sometimes that isn't going to be for them, and that isn't reality anyway.
Yeah. And let's be honest, the dynamic of business and life itself is changing so fast these days, with new technologies, new things coming out. A lot of these programs haven't kept up with the times. The moment that they get released or they get put out there, they're already outdated, they're obsolete.
Well, and I think they try to pretend that some things matter that really don't. I mean, and it leads to a lot of the problems we have in business sometimes, because people think there's got to be a different way. Here's how business works. You need to bring more money in than you pay out.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
So people act like you need an MBA to start a business, but most people who start businesses don't have an MBA. And people act like you need an MBA to run an effective business. But think about the millions of immigrants around the world right now who come to some brand new country and who run some kind of store or some kind of small manufacturing operation or some kind of little shop. They might not even speak the language of the country that they've moved to, but they know one thing: I got to charge more than I pay out. I don't need complicated inventory management systems. And because I'm running the shop, I can see that we never sell any of that beer, and we sell tons of that beer. And I have people every day who ask me for this product that I don't have, so I started carrying it. And nobody seems to be interested in that product that I'm carrying, so I stopped carrying it. All I know is I've got to pay more money out, or I gotta get more money in than I pay out. And if I'm not doing that, I will quickly go bankrupt. And what a lot of big businesses are trying to contradict that fundamental reality of business by playing games with the accounting, by playing games with inventory, by playing games with borrowing, by playing games with investors. Because, hey, if I get the investors and I pay myself millions of dollars and then I go bankrupt, I still have millions of dollars. It's just the company that went bankrupt. Yeah. So I think a lot of it is just a shell game, when real business is just, I got to bring more in than I send out. Everybody knows that. And everything is built on that fundamental reality. And yet that's not what we want to talk about in those programs. And we want to deny or act as though that's really relevant or really crucial, when, again, most, not even just some, most businesses around the world function just fine without anybody knowing anything in any MBA program. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. David Rendall, we're nearly out of time. I've got one more question. Before I do that, how can the viewers and listeners today catch up with you, connect with you if they'd like to be in touch with more of the awesomeness that you are?
Yeah. It's just drendall.com. So D as in David, and then RENDALL, DRENDALL.com. All my videos are on there. The assessments are on there. The links to the books are on there. Everything's free, nothing to buy on the website. I'm not one of my strengths isn't sales and marketing. So my idea is just try to be as helpful as possible and hope that comes around. Yeah. If you want a shirt, you can go to davidrendall.store. We got freak shirts there. That's one of the newer things I'm doing. And again, doing a terrible job selling it and marketing it. but I wear the shirts and people like them. And so maybe it'll go somewhere at some point in the future. Maybe I need masks. Maybe that's what I need to do.
I think your
Sell
shirt's
more
upside
masks.
down.
What?
I think your shirt's upside down.
Ah, see, it's a lesson in perspective, because when I look down, it's perfect. FRE. Nailed it.
I love that. Love that. Love that. One question. So, mate, knowing all that you know now and having been through all that you've been through, if you were to have a conversation with a 10-year-old version of you, what would you say to him?
I'd say don't listen to those people. I'd say I'd say everything that I say to everyone else. I'd say your weaknesses, your hyperactivity, your inability to do what you're told, your desire, your interest in saying what's on your mind, your willingness to fight against authority, your drive to accomplish your own goals instead of somebody else's. Those are all fantastic, and they're all full of it. And don't believe them, right? Don't believe them. Don't listen. Don't let other people, again, I mean, I think, forget that I experienced this. Forget that I wrote a book called The Freak Factor. Forget any of that. I read and listen to 100 books a year. This year, I've probably listened to 800 podcast episodes, because while I'm running and while I'm biking and even while I'm swimming now, I can listen to things while I'm driving, while I'm traveling. Here's the one thing that everyone needs to know is that human beings, no matter how smart, and sometimes even when they're smart, are terrible predictors of who is going to be successful. We don't know. It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me. In fact, I try to cause this in my own life. My oldest daughter is the best. She gets good grades in school. She took college classes in high school. She got an amazing scholarship. She was good at swimming. She's the all-American girl. She does everything right. My youngest daughter is a borderline delinquent who's going to end up in prison soon, if not, if she's not already, has a warrant out for her arrest that I'm not aware of. I'm pretty sure the youngest one is going to be more successful than the oldest one. I just don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know what, but I know that this is sending me all those traditional signals that everything's going to be great, but I'm smart enough because of what I teach to see there's some downsides to the way that she accomplishes those things. And I'm also smart enough to see there's a lot of upsides to the personality of the one who's always getting in trouble and challenging and pushing limits and those kinds of things. So what I know is that human beings are terrible predictors of the success or failure of other human beings. We can't do it in sports. No, even when it's worth millions and millions of dollars. Just think about that. When we can't do it in sports, we can't look and go, that's going to be the next fill in the blank in football, in soccer, in anything, basketball. We simply can't. And then there's always this person who comes out of nowhere and they're like, no one would have seen it. So I think that's what I told myself. Nobody knows, Dave. Anybody who tells you you will or won't make it doesn't know anything that they're talking about. It's up to you sooner or later. And don't let that cloud your view of who you are sooner or later. And I think you kind of mentioned this earlier. You have to construct your own beliefs about who you are. You have to build on that foundation. And even if it's not true, you have to sometimes make it true. That it works to be you, right? It works to be you, and you're gonna, because that's all you've got. That's all. It doesn't matter if what you got was good or what you got was bad, or it's what you've got. It's I'm 6'6", I'm skinny, I'm hyperactive. That's all I've got to build the rest of my life on. It doesn't matter what you wish you were. It doesn't matter what other people tell you should be. That's not reality, and you can't build on that foundation.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, really, really resonates. The whole conversation today is music to my ears. And I guess chapter 14, I speak about entrepreneurship, and my kind of beliefs is that entrepreneurship gives us the ability to have the truest expression of who we really are, if we allow ourselves to be. And I honestly believe that we're in an era where we can no longer rely upon the governments and the politicians and the leadership of our countries to lead the world to a better place. I believe that it comes down to you and I believe it comes down to entrepreneurs to build great businesses and to fund charitable organizations and to allow each of us to become all of who we're here to be. And I think entrepreneurship does that for us. That's my honest belief. Yeah.
Well, and when you build your own business, you know, I talk a ton. We talked about it earlier about alignment, finding the right fit, finding that situation puts a spotlight on the best things about you. And if you can't find that situation, then you can create that situation, right? And entrepreneurship is one way to do that. I can be who I am because this is my uniform for work. Yeah. I'm not wearing a suit. I got to make my own shirt. I got to make my own uniform. Other people wear my clothes. I got to create my own brand. I can be tattooed and not worry about not getting a job because somebody doesn't like, you know, me for doing things in that particular way. And so I think entrepreneurship is an opportunity to create the right fit instead of necessarily, I mean, I love, there's one example that I have that I love is there's this guy that I know in Dallas, Texas, who has dyslexia. And so he found there's lots of strengths if you have dyslexia, even though there's obvious weaknesses. And he built an SEO company, search engine optimization company. And that's what he does with half of his time is he's the CEO of this company that he founded. He's an entrepreneur. And he spends the other half of his time as a sculptor, right? As a sculptor. That's not a job, right? You can't just go, well, as soon as I find that job where I can work in SEO and do sculpting, then that's when life is really going to work out for me. But when you're an entrepreneur, you know, you can do whatever. So for me, I'm an international speaker. I get to travel all over the world. And while I do that, I get to go running and hiking in all of these amazing places. I get to do races and ultra marathons and Ironman triathlons and all these amazing places. I get to be an endurance athlete without needing a sponsor, without needing to be a professional, but I have this life where all I do is I exercise and I speak, or right now, all I do is exercise because I can't leave the house. But I've built this life that isn't a job, right? Yeah. It isn't a job. But I've built a life where it's a job for me because I'm the CEO. I'm the CEO of and my wife has started her own interior design business because that's the perfect fit for her. And it took her years to have the confidence. It took her years of encouragement from me that she's enough, that she has what it takes, that she has this superpower. And she's so clear on all the things that are wrong with her. But when she starts interior design, she just comes alive, right? Yeah. So I'm with you 100%. Entrepreneurship, I don't think is the answer for everyone because I think some people do fit. Some people do like the security of a job. That's part of their fit. Or they like the clarity and the structure, or they're great at the teamwork and the collaboration, or whatever it happens to be, or they don't want to run something. They want to be a part of. There's a million reasons not to be an entrepreneur. But for a lot of people, that's the place. That's the way you can create the right fit in a world that you don't fit. And then all of a sudden you do, because you built something for yourself and you fit perfectly inside of it. And then you start to attract other people and go, ooh, I would fit perfectly inside of that same place.
Yes.
And then you start to realize, okay, I'm a weirdo, but there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a weirdo, but there's people that are weird like me. Yeah.
Mate, I've had an absolute ball and I could chat to you for hours.
But you got to go to sleep because it's like going on. It's after midnight there, right? It's you're literally burning the midnight oil.
It's getting late. So look, drendall.com. We'll put the link below if you want to check out some of the amazing stuff that he's doing. If you are wanting to build a profitable, purpose-driven business that works without you, get my copy of The Path to Freedom. Put a link below there as well. A whole bunch of bonuses in the lead up to launch on the 3rd of August. Mate, I'm so grateful for your time, for your energy, for everything you've been through to be who you are right here, right now, sharing your message with the world.
Thanks for having me on. It's exciting. Anytime I get to talk to anyone outside of my own home these days, I'm super pumped about that.
I love that. And thank you everyone from across the world who's joined in live tonight or watched the replay. Appreciate you. Hit the like button. Let us know that you've watched the episode, and please share this because I think there's a very important message that more people, more parents, more kids, more employees, more entrepreneurs need to see. Thank you so much for your time, David.